I tell you what, Johnny, they sure don't make them like they used to. Yes, another classic. Today we have Poltergeist. Poltergeist is not a new release. This is a film from 1982. They recently did a complete 4K restoration because a good way to capitalize on these classic films. They keep re-releasing all these old movies, both in theaters but also on 4K finally with like complete remasters. So I'm here for it because I get to watch movies that I love again in a high resolution. To get into the spooky season before the spooky season actually gets getting into, September was the month of like some classic Steven Spielberg, but also classic horror, I guess. So Poltergeist was coming to theater for I don't know a day or two, and I had never seen it on the silver screen, and boy howdy did I want to. Directed by Toby Hooper, who is unfortunately no longer with us, but this guy, Jesus, up until his death in 2017, this man was directing since 1959. He was directing for decades and decades, and he's involved in the film industry during all that time, with his latest release being some, I think, foreign film called Jinn that came out in 2013. So, I mean, the guy only died about 4 years ago, but he was on the grind, like pour one out, R.I.P. for one of the greats. So, I mean, I can go over what I believe to be the three main, but there's also some like there's a lot going on with the production of this film way back in the day and subsequent films. The star is the father, I suppose you'd say, or arguably the star. If you got Craig T. Nelson, call him an off-brand Kevin Costner, at least back in his early days. But funny enough, this guy, Craig, voice of Bob in The Incredible. Like that's cool. He's been in so much more. Very large filmography. He's one of the few to come out of this movie unscathed, it seems. The little girl that is like the crux of this film's plot and all that, who was acting before this film and then stuck around and finished filming both Poltergeist 2 and 3, which I'll admit I haven't seen, she died like very shortly after Poltergeist 3 wrapped. Very unfortunate business. Sepsis, I think, or some septic shock, I think. Some along those lines, but like, goddamn, like the little girl and had a whole possibly prolific career ahead of her and didn't. So again, R.I.P. And then the wife in the family, she I think also is a very good like grounding force in this film. Jo Beth Williams. Sorry, I forgot. Little girl Heather O'Rourke. Jo Beth Williams is the wife, the mother. She's still acting. Actually, she's alive. She's still acting. From what I can tell on her IMDb, it's mostly like mediocre television, what I consider to be mediocre in my elitist opinions. Stuff like TNT dramas and the like. I was informed by my mother that there's much more to this than meets the eye in terms of production involved in this film and how there's tales of it actually being haunted and people dying both shortly after the film and then later on, or unrelated stuff or accidents on set or creepy shit happening in the film. I'm a walking contradiction. I am the most open-minded skeptic you will ever see, or maybe I'm the most skeptical, open-minded individual. I'm willing to hear out anything. I did a minor amount of research. It's, to me, a bunch of coincidences, but some of the stuff is like, I mean, come on, like, apparently they used real human remains in the skeleton pool scene, which is a little bit fucked up. And then, I don't know, it seems like cheap film production in the 80s led to a bunch of accidents, or a few accidents. Combine that with superstitions, with people that are probably on edge due to the matter, the subject material being filmed. I don't know. Choose to believe it or not, we're not going to really be addressing most of the crazy shit that went down during production, but it is worth looking into because it's some cool stories and it makes for, you pop on a couple of videos and watch the behind the scenes, and I'm sure you'll get some cool cast tales. People almost dying, people that did die. But we're here talking about the film and my enjoyment of it. But so Poltergeist, long story short, typical suburban family living in a brand new housing development. Everything's all hunky dory. They're actually a really cool, like, mostly tight family. All of a sudden, the little girl, the daughter, starts speaking to the TV. The static in the TV is talking to her, apparently. Give it a day or so of some spooky things where things are moving around the house and stacking themselves, and then, sure enough, it all boils over, and one day after a huge spiritual distraction, the little girl's abducted into the TV, into another realm, and then boom, you have our story. Then, of course, the parents, who are naturally distraught, but actually logically understand there's something more than just human forces at work here, reach out to people that might be more well equipped, that then can reach out to their own professionals and work towards figuring out what's going on, locate the daughter, and help bring her back. Overall, it might be one of my favorite supernatural thrillers of all time. I guess you could say like supernatural horror, basically. I mean, it's for a movie that's rated PG in 1982. This movie's about PG as Jaws is. Like, there's some guy rips his own face off in this movie that gives you any indication of how the rating should have probably been. But yeah, it's a really engaging premise, and the story is handled well. I'm kind of both looking at it as a film, period, but also as my personal enjoyment. I really enjoyed this film, and upon watching it again, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say I loved it, but I think it's really good, and I always enjoy watching Poltergeist. Practical effects. Your boy MovieMan loves the practical effects. Whether it's wire work, whether it's sparks, whether it's transposing a demonic something or other to be all spooky and whatnot, or making a full-size tree, or even if it is real skeletons in a muddy swimming pool, it all, even being this old and kind of dated in spots, it feels real. That's the thing. Like, the actors bring this to the screen very well. The plight of the family, I really get behind it, because the family's likable, and they're good, and they're well intentioned, even if they don't realize until it's too late why all this shit's happening. You rooting for them. You want them to find this little girl, this poor girl, and get her the hell out of there. And so all this shit seems, even spookier and unknown and supernatural and scary. And it's all held together, I believe, by all the hard work that goes into the props, the setting, the sets and all that. Just bravo. I don't know what much I can say about this. Like I said, actors are great. The direction is great. I really like how the film is mostly in the second and third act, or like the latter half of the film is probably my favorite. I think it's got some really great like moments of like tension and build up, and we're winding up to this final like mission and get her out of there, and then when you think she's out of there, turns out booga booga, no, it's not quite over yet. Like, all of that is, I think, done and executed very, very well for the most part. First act is still good. There's some minor spooky happenings that kind of lead up to this. Maybe tightened up aspects of the first act. I don't have much in the way of huge complaints, but I think, like, you could have made the pacing slicker, I think, throughout the film. We could have had more build-ups like the third act has, I guess. It's hard to put into words, because this is all really good, but I had that inkling, like, under the skin, kind of like with E.T., right? E.T. is a near perfect film, but it's missing that extra pizzazz, that extra binding to make it all one cohesive, perfect experience. It's very difficult for films to be perfect. E.T. is near perfection. Between my enjoyment of it and how it is as a film, what it sets out and strives to do, it's almost very Ghostbusters-esque, minus all the comedic elements, Upon seeing it, I just want to kind of watch it again. Like, it's entertaining, it's fun. The kid actors, normally kid actors, I mean, I always say this, with kid actors, they're either really good or not really that good, and both the kids are great. The lead girl, I mean, she plays like creepy yet naivete really well, just like, oh, it's the people on the TV, such iconic lines in their ears. It's great. Like, you didn't move the bodies, you son of a bitch! Like, even though I hadn't seen this film for literally years, like, I hadn't sat down and watched this movie for years, I still found myself recalling scenes that were coming up, and even little lines of dialogue and all that, and that kind of tells you that it's iconic in its own right. And I mean, this movie in itself has gone on to inspire so much in the world of horror and supernatural horror. I mean, hell, I haven't watched it, but even a remake came out not too long ago. Don't know how well that did, but I can venture a guess. And I don't know, maybe someday I'll watch Poltergeist 2 and 3. I'm low-key nervous that it'll ruin the magic of the first one, but, The movie man's gotta watch them all, right? But after sitting on it for a couple days, I come to the consensus. Poltergeist is definitely worth, I would say, a high 4 out of 5. A high 4 out of 5. Does the movie show its age in certain spots? Sure. Some of the interlaced film visual add-on effects aren't great. Some of them kind of aged a little bit poorly, but what's practical there, sure, more than makes up for it. The actors, the cast, the story, the plight, the spoops, the spookiness, the genuinely some like nightmare fuel for your kids in terms of horror and like the little things that might scare them that are then accentuated by this rampant poltergeist. I think it all works. I think Poltergeist, if you ever get a chance to see it in theaters, definitely see it in theaters. Now, if you're prone to seizures, maybe not. There's a lot of flashing, blinking, strobing lights, which for me add to the effect. But if you're gonna like spaz out during that, then please don't for your own safety. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. Poltergeist, 1982 release. I would give it a high 4 out of 5. I think the same as I gave E.T. I think I enjoyed this more than E.T. I only keep bringing that up because Steven Spielberg was like a producer on this, kind of like was introducing this film using his name to help, and probably gave a lot of tips and assistance during production. So thank you guys and gals so much for watching as always, and stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review. And goodbye, travelers.